Well, good morning, Big Ten fans, and I presume that means most of you are Ohio State fans. We don't have that same SEC loyalty that they do in the South. You know, nobody chants Big Ten when Ohio State clubs Clemson. At least I didn't hear it, but Ohio State fans, I don't think they care much about the rest of the Big Ten, and Big Ten's probably tired of having the Buckeyes beat up on them, but it is a good day for Kevin Warren, that's for sure. He's like one win by the Buckeyes away in the national championship game against Alabama from taking the career victory lap of having done everything right on COVID. That's the only downside of Ohio State beating Clemson.
The ultimate unearned victory lap.
And you know he will take it, right?
Oh,
my goodness.
He'll get a nice shot of him with all his diplomas on the wall.
Yes, he will. And then he'll have his own crystal football.
Talking about the success of the conference.
We did it right. We didn't put anybody in danger. Yeah, that's what we have to look forward to. But, you know, that's way down the list of priorities. As we begin a few good men on the Big Ten podcast. Hi, everybody. I'm Bruce Hooley. Andy Anders beside me. We both picked Ohio State. I don't know whether in Andy's case it was the wrath of Buckeye Nation in case you picked against them and they won. It's never a bad move, as former Columbus Dispatch, current Letterman Row expert Tim May always says, never pick against Ohio State. I don't think Tim ever has. But some games, Andy, you afterward go, like, why didn't I see that up front? And I think we referenced as possible factors in the game all the things that proved to be the major factors in the game.
Well, yeah, I think, honestly, after the game, I've listened to, I guess, a lot of other Ohio State outlets and their kind of the things they've said. And that's like what everyone's been saying about this game is it's all the strengths you thought Ohio State could play out in this game. You talked about before the game, like this thing could go right for them, this thing could go right for them. All of them went right for them, and I think in a bigger factor than we were all expecting. My big thing going into this was I thought Ohio State had an advantage on both lines, but what really concerned me was the secondary. I didn't expect Trevor Lawrence to be running for his life on every single play.
Yeah, he was.
The defensive line ate Clemson's O-line for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and probably threw in an extra snack.
Yeah, midnight snack.
They absolutely dominated up front. Offensive line, maybe even more so on the opposite side. And the tight ends were washing down Clemson defensive ends. I mean, down blocking Jeremy Ruckert cleared out lanes. Jeremy Ruckert was clearing out lanes for Trey Sermon. The line advantage was insane, but far from the only thing that went for Ohio State in that game. I think Justin Fields, I can't think of a better performance by an Ohio State quarterback in a single game ever.
Well, I watched Troy Smith take Michigan apart as a sophomore and as a senior, so I'd have to think about those comparatively. But as big as the Michigan game is, it's not a college football playoff game. Although in 2006 it was a national championship play-in game, so you could accord it that same status. Nevertheless, 6 touchdown passes is 6 touchdown passes, and
half of those, while his ribs were, I guess, not broken because he probably wouldn't have been playing if they were broken, but bruised. He was certainly in pain.
Yeah.
I'm sure they gave him the good old cortisone shot or whatever at halftime.
Take the needle. My friend Chris Spielman always used to say, take the needle.
Because he came out, it looked like he was in significantly less pain in the second half, but still threw 2 touchdown strikes at the end of the first half, while noticeably grimacing after every single throw.
Adrenaline's a wonderful thing.
Absolutely.
And emotion's a wonderful thing. And you went through and very, eloquently captured the essence of the game from an X's and O's perspective. I think what also played into it, Kirk Herbstreit said it with 12 minutes to go, and it was interesting. I don't know. It was like a time stood still thing for me. The minute he started to talk, I thought, here it comes. He's going to put this in perfect perspective. And he said, basically, this game boiled down to one team. This is their Super Bowl. They've thought about it for a year. They've obsessed about it for a year. They've stewed about it, fretted about it, obsessed about it. And they all together tonight at one time, just in the words of the great General Maximus in Gladiator, unleashed hell on Clemson. I mean, they just did. On my signal, unleash hell. And that's what they did. That was revenge for 29-23 last year in Glendale.
Well, not just revenge for 29-23. This has been said multiple times that I've heard. Ohio State plays the disrespect card better than any other team in the country. I mean, 8-1 is an underdog since Urban Meyer, Ryan Day have been coach at Ohio State. 8-1 now. And they were a touchdown underdog in this game. And not only that, Dabo Swinney, I mean, we all know this storyline. This has been talked about and ranted about everywhere. Ranked Ohio State 11th heading into this game. Did you get a chance to see Dabo's presser after the game?
I did not. It was so late. I wanted to do my own podcast right after the game. So I actually, with 8 minutes to go, recorded my podcast because there was no comeback happening. As I started that podcast with, the fat lady hasn't sung yet, but I can hear her singing, warming up. I mean, it was that over. And so, no, I did not. I actually have a little different take on Dabo. I know most people hate the fact that he ranked him 11th. And I assume you're going to allude to the fact that he stuck with that after the game. Mm-hmm. I admire a person who has a reason for what they are doing. And even though the outcome of the game proved that Ohio State was clearly the better team on that night than Clemson, he basically said, look, my issue is teams that play 10, 11 games have to deal with more than teams that play 6 or 7 games. And so I don't regret it. I thought he was very complimentary to Ohio State, but if and until he had said, yeah, I screwed up, I should have ranked them second, that was the only thing that people were going to be happy with. And I'm not even sure they would have been happy with that.
No, look, here's my main issue with it, Bruce. I get the principle of it, and I understand why he did it. I mean, it's been well explained. He was complimentary to Ohio State, but you cannot deny the fact that it motivated them.
Oh, no doubt.
You saw all the players tweeting out after the game. Yeah. 11. Garrett Wilson on Twitter. Does that make them 18 now?
Yeah.
After the game. So you have to weigh that as a head coach. I mean, there's principle, but no one's going to know about this principle. You don't have to be, the ballot is public. You know that this is a team that is going to take any fuel you give them and use it. Why not, just for this once, put it aside, rank them in the top 5, don't give that extra log into the fire. And then after the game to say, no, it wasn't a factor for them. That didn't motivate them. Yeah, it did.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
No doubt it did.
To deny that fact of it is the main thing I see is kind of far-sighted on Dabo's part. To deny that it was a factor in the game, because it was. They felt disrespected. They used it to say, hey, you want to rank us 11? Fine, we're going to go out and beat you as the number 3 team in the country. So, it was definitely a big motivator for them, and that's the main thing I have. I don't have a problem with Dabo with his principle. I wouldn't have done it, even if that's what I personally thought, because I was raised, you don't give bulletin board material to the other guys, but denying that it was a factor is kind of ludicrous.
That's actually, the fact that he did it, knowing his poll vote was going to be public and knowing that he was going to play Ohio State, I sort of admire that. I sort of go, okay, you're not afraid to, because most people would be like, well, I'm not giving him anything, on me. I kind of admire it, but I don't think it was the smartest thing in the world to do. It's I feel like I'm kind of watching the Jackass videos, the guys who jump off roofs, and I go, well, I admire the chutzpah, but I wouldn't do it, So that was kind of Dabo's Jackass moment, I guess, where he was going to do what he was going to do, and he did it. And it didn't work out for him at all. So did Clemson winning 1 national championship with Trevor Lawrence underachieve?
That's a tough question. I don't think so. I think it is so hard to win a national title, especially in today's age of the playoff, because you've got to beat 2 top-tier teams usually. Usually, I mean, beating Ohio State, then turning around and beating LSU last year. When LSU, let's be honest, Oklahoma was the 4th team out. You had LSU, Ohio State, Clemson last year, and everyone else below that. Oklahoma was the 4th team that happened to get in. Everybody knew the weaknesses they had on defense. Everybody knew that they could get exposed, and LSU did that. Clemson had a much tougher game. First round, I think there was some residual effect leading into that game. Not to say LSU wasn't the better team, because I think LSU was, but that would have been one of the most well-earned national championships ever, which I think is why you can't fault them for losing it. winning a championship with Trevor Lawrence when he was a freshman, and then you lose to a very good Ohio State team this year. I don't think you could say they underachieved. They might be a little disappointed that they returned what they returned and weren't able to beat the Buckeyes again, because going into this game, it kind of looked like Ohio State is missing more than Clemson did last year. But overall, made the playoffs all 3 years, got the one natty.
Yeah.
Can't say Clemson underachieved in my opinion.
I'm with you on that. A lot of people will say that, and I actually asked that question as a precursor to this question, which is, will Ohio State have underachieved if it doesn't win a national championship with Justin Fields?
Well, it had Fields won last year than Lawrence. Lawrence was at Clemson, obviously, because he was at Georgia his freshman season. It's just so hard to win. People undervalue how hard it is to win a national title.
That's exactly right.
It is, to get to the playoffs both years you have somebody like that. That's a great achievement. They won the Big Ten both years. They've lost one game thus far. If they lose to Alabama in the national title, it'll be 2 under Justin Fields. They won't have lost a single regular season game, single Big Ten title game. They will have only lost playoff games with Justin Fields. You cannot say they underachieved then, especially given the numbers he's put up and some of the performances he's had on the biggest stages. Obviously, this Clemson game is thus far his crown jewel at Ohio State. We'll see what he does against Alabama. Last year against Michigan, coming off the bench after the knee injury, tossing that 30-yarder to Garrett Wilson. I mean, he's had some of those moments. I'm hardly ever going to fault a team that doesn't win a national title and say they underachieve, because it is so hard to win one, other than like if you are sort of a generational team like the 2015 Ohio State team was. That was a team that should have at least made the playoff, probably won a national title, because they returned most of the pieces from a national title team the previous year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We want to thank you for watching us on Twitch, the Chris Landry Football Channel on Twitch. Hit that follow button, the heart located in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. When you do, you'll receive an email every time we go live or a notification. And our podcast is sponsored by America's Betting Experts. Go to LandryFootball.com, click on the America's Betting Experts link, and use the betting service legal in your area, whether it's PointsBet or DraftKings or whatever it is. They'll give you a nice match, $100 up to $1,000. American Betting Experts is one of the largest licensed sports and casino vendors in the U.S. Go to LandryFootball.com for that special offer. Okay, Justin Fields has had Heisman moments in his career. He will not win the Heisman Trophy. He's not a finalist on Wednesday. That is, I think, exclusively a factor of the small number of games he's played compared to Mac Jones, Kyle Trask, which I can't even believe Kyle Trask is a finalist, but okay, whatever. He's not on my ballot. The other, Devonta Smith, of course, and then Trevor Lawrence. Is it an advantage for Ohio State in this COVID era if either Mac Jones or Devonta Smith wins the Heisman? They will not be in New York. They will not have the whole falderall that typically Heisman people have to go through. But typically those Heisman people go through it a month ahead of their playoff game, not the week of their playoff game. So do you think, are you rooting for Mac Jones or Devonta Smith because it'll play some kind of distraction impact or motivational impact for Ohio State or whatever on the part of Alabama?
Well, it will have those impacts. I think they're marginalized by the factors you said. The fact that there's not the big ceremony around it. You're not flying out to New York. You're not celebrating with all these people. It's pretty much you're going to get it over a remote, like a Zoom call, essentially.
You get a Zoom Heisman.
You get a Zoom Heisman, and then, it's right back to prep work. So the normal effects, and we've seen winning the Heisman and getting those individual awards have negative impacts on a team before. We alluded to the 2006 Ohio State team earlier. I think Troy Smith's Heisman had a negative impact on him in the national championship game.
Definitely. So did the In-N-Out burgers had a negative effect on him.
Absolutely. But topic for another day.
That's a tasty burger, as Troy would say. Yeah. Or Samuel L. Jackson. All right. So we have one other factor, one similar factor for Alabama that befell Clemson, although it's not to date yet, befalling Alabama in the exact same way. Tony Elliott, the Clemson offensive coordinator, couldn't be in the Superdome and he couldn't call plays. I do think that played a factor. It didn't play a 21-point factor.
No.
Okay. Steve Sarkisian, the offensive coordinator at Alabama, is on the Nick Saban rehabilitation tour as was, as have other guys been in the past, Lane Kiffin most notably. And Sark was hired Saturday as the head coach at Texas, which gave Tom Herman kind of a milquetoast vote of confidence a few weeks ago when they couldn't get Urban Meyer. And then Herman won his 4th bowl game at Texas. And then my guess is when Sarkisian said, yeah, I'll take it, they fired Tom Herman. So Sarkisian is going to
their guy, apparently.
He's going to stay with Bama. And I was not aware how many times Bama's been through this in the title game. Now, in Ohio State fans will remember in 2007, the 2007 season, the 2008 Sugar Bowl national title game, Bo Pelini was the defensive coordinator at LSU. He was hired at Nebraska, but he stayed at LSU till the game was over and LSU won the game.
Jeff Hafley last year
stayed with Ohio State. So but Saban's been through this before. He's been through it with Kirby Smart. He's been through it with Lane Kiffin. He had Kiffin, he kicked Kiffin out of the building, which he's not doing with Sarkisian. He did not do it with Jeremy Pruitt in 2017 when they beat Georgia in the national title game. Jeremy Pruitt had been hired at Tennessee. And Mike Locksley was the OC when they played Clemson 3 years ago. Locksley stayed, didn't make any difference. 44-16 was the final in that one. So Sarkisian is going to stay with Bama. And maybe this is one thing where COVID works for him, because Sark met his team on Zoom on Saturday, but he's supposedly staying in Tuscaloosa and staying with the Tide through January 11th, Monday night's championship game.
Yeah, I just that coordinator leaving after the game dynamic is always weird, and I imagine it's weird in the locker room, but that's the only way I could see it playing out negatively for Alabama. It's kind of that weird locker room thing, maybe that slight bit less buy-in from the players because the person's leaving. But I don't think it'll affect Sark's ability to coach in the game so much. I don't think he's going to look ahead a week past a national championship, because it's a national championship. He'll bring his best schemes, I think. He'll bring his best game plans to the table. The only question is the buy-in from the players, and if that's there, then I don't think it's going to have any negative impact on Alabama.
Well, for Sark, I think there's more stake in this game for Steve Sarkisian than there was on Friday night, because now that he's the head coach at Texas, all these Texas high school players are watching him to see if he's the guy whose offense puts up 50 on Ohio State in the national championship game, and his quarterback or his wide receiver wins a Heisman Trophy. All of a sudden, a lot of Texas juniors who are verbally committed elsewhere are going to at least have to take note of that. Now, if his offense goes out there against Ohio State and lays an egg, then notably Ohio State, which is just absolutely, pillaged the state of Texas for elite high school talent, that would, in my view, would not interrupt Ohio State's, would add to Ohio State's success in Texas. And Sarkisian going in there and saying, oh, no, it's going to be different now. They'll be like, wait a second, it wasn't different on the 11th of January. They smoked you.
Well, yes. The one thing I'll add to that, though, is that in my brief time now, I've been covering recruiting all of 4 months. It's rare to see one game really swing any one recruit's opinion of a team. It can gain momentum.
What if you're a quarterback? What if you're Quinn Ewers?
Quinn Ewers, I don't think.
Quinn Ewers, who supposedly grew up with Texas posters on the wall,
painted burnt orange, all that.
Wanted to be a Texas Longhorn, and then had committed to Texas, and then because I think of Herman's tenuous job security, Quinn Ewers is now committed to Ohio State. He's a junior. He's entering his senior year. If Sarkisian gets to Texas and Texas offense, let's say in this game they look really good, I think that's the one guy that I thought, Garrett Wilson, Ohio State got out of Texas, Baron Browning, J.K. Dobbins, on and on and on.
Yeah. No, it's definitely an interesting narrative. I just think what I know about Ewers and the relationship he really built with the Ohio State staff and now with his fellow classmates of 2022, I can't see Texas coming back in that one. And I don't think Sarkisian's the only guy I could have seen pulling a coup like that off is if they had landed Urban.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
they landed Urban. Maybe Urban could have pulled that kind of a coup off. Sarkisian, I don't see. It's recruiting is about relationships first and foremost, and Ewers now has really strong relationships with Ohio State, and it's going to be hard to break those down. It's made easier by the fact he grew up a Texas fan, but plenty of recruits don't let their previous fandom influence where they go to school because they know they got to go where's best for them in their careers and where they feel most comfortable and what's going to get them to the next level. Ryan Day has proven himself as one of the best quarterback developers in the country, too. So I think that adds to it.
We are part of the Landry Football Network. Go to LandryFootball.com for all the podcasts about all the aspects of football that interest you. If it's recruiting, if it's scouting, if it's the NFL, college, high school, we have it all at LandryFootball.com. And click on that America's Betting Experts logo. They are our title sponsor, one of the largest sports and casino vendors in the U.S., and they'll have a nice matching bet for you, $100 up to $1,000. Thanks for watching us on Twitch. Hit that follow button. You'll get notifications every single time, not just for our show, but for other shows like our friends from the Big 12 who follow at the top of the hour with In Defense of the Big 12. Speaking of defense, what's your just distant opinion of the Alabama defense that will attempt to slow down an Ohio State offense that was clearly clicking on all cylinders in its win over Clemson?
Right. Definitely better than Clemson's defense, I would say, especially in the front seven. Ohio State's offensive line, while one of the best in the country, and I think we'll have still a slight advantage in this game, it won't be as big as we saw against Clemson. Clemson's front seven just didn't get tested as much in the ACC, and I think it kind of elevated their status. And then Ohio State exposed it a little bit in the playoff game there. Clemson still has depth and talent there, but they were young. Alabama has some more experienced guys, some more proven guys, I think, on the interior especially, that are going to make this a little tougher sledding for Ohio State. And it'll be in battle I'm really interested in is the line of scrimmage in this game, because I was sure Ohio State was going to have a slight edge against Clemson in that fact. Turned out to be a much bigger edge than I thought it was going to be. Alabama, better on both lines. I think Ohio State, again, may have a slight edge on both sides, and I'm not sure. Particularly not Ohio State's O-line against Clemson, against Alabama's D-line. Because without Landon Dickerson on Alabama's O-line, why do I keep saying Clemson? On Alabama's O-line, without Landon Dickerson, I could see Tommy Togiai and Haskell Garrett getting some real push up the middle. But that Ohio State O-line versus Alabama D-line matchup is one I'm really looking forward to. Then in the back end, if Ohio State can hold up in protection and give Fields time to throw, and this is the wonderful thing about Fields' performance against Clemson, is that we saw now he's finally gotten that ability to take the check down. There was times Clemson sent pressure at him in that game. The first receiver downfield wasn't open. He turns, flicks it out to Sermon. 12-yard gain. Mm-hmm. Checks it down to Olave. The first pass he completed was his third read. Yeah. I went back and watched that play. He went 1, 2, 3. Olave's open. 12-yard gain. So that's something we haven't seen him do this year. That's been his number one weakness, and he's doing it now. And what that does, if the line is giving him time to get through those progressions and he's checking down early, it opens up the deep stuff late, and that's what happened against Clemson. And Alabama's secondary has similar issues. The passing game could really open up if Ohio State's offensive line is holding up at the point of attack, because the pressure is going to be coming. You just give him that extra half second, it'll make all the difference for Ohio State's offense in this game. We could really see a track beat in this game, Bruce. I'm not too sure that's not how this game plays out.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly can. That's kind of a part of where we are offensively in the college game right now, is that the idea of what a good defense is has changed, and that's kind of why I asked you the question about your perception of Alabama's defense, because I was under the impression that Alabama's defense was really vulnerable. But I realize now, as I look at their scores, that I was scarred or overly impacted by watching them play at Mississippi in week 3. That was a track meet. It was 63-48. That's Lane Kiffin against Nick Saban. It's a guy who's worked with Nick Saban, worked with Alabama's defense, knows the schemes. So that's pretty much your insider trading right there. I thought I'd see that in other scores on Bama's season-long game log. It doesn't really seem to me that it's a bad defensive performance to hold Texas A&M to 24 points. Texas A&M's talent, I watched it the other night in the Orange Bowl, they're legit. Georgia, they have legit talent. 24 points, they held Georgia.
Yeah, that was with Stetson Bennett, though.
True, that's true. It was. LSU, 17 points. The rest of them, 3-0. Kentucky, they hold Kentucky to 3 points.
That's
Kentucky, that's a good.
Yeah.
So I have a more flattering opinion of Bama's defense now that I look at the totality of their scores, and they do have some guys that are going to be, very high picks in the NFL, chiefly cornerback Patrick Surtain. That one to me is interesting. Like, Bama's going to put Devonta Smith in places that will get him covered by guys Ohio State doesn't want covering him. And Ohio State's going to put Chris Olave in places where Alabama doesn't want the guy covering him.
Or Garrett Wilson.
So I think, to me, this could be a game where we see a lot of big plays. And if I had to boil it down to one factor, it's going to be, does Ohio State get pressure on Mac Jones? Because they got pressure on Trevor Lawrence. They made Trevor Lawrence uncomfortable. He's way more mobile than Mac Jones.
Exactly. That was the point I was about to bring up.
Yeah. And so that's what I want to know is if Bama can protect Mac Jones, that to me elevates significantly Alabama's chances of winning the game.
But yeah, Mac Jones, 3 rushing yards this year. Not at all the dual threat Clemson's Trevor Lawrence was. And I think that's the only advantage, really, when I look at it, matchup to matchup wise, that Clemson really has on Alabama. If you're just comparing offenses and saying, well, can Ohio State's defensive performance against Clemson translate to Alabama? I think not having to account for their quarterback is a big difference. It's going to add an extra defender on some plays. Now, I think, honestly, this year, Najee Harris better than Travis Etienne.
Yeah.
Definitely better receivers because Alabama has the best receivers in the country, Devontae Smith and the Mechie behind him. Imagine this team if they had Jalen Waddle.
Oh, my goodness. And we don't know for sure they're not going to have Jalen Waddle. It's highly unlikely, but Bama's not really saying. They just say he's doing, they came up with some term I never heard before, dry land drills or something like that. Like, I don't know, dry something. Anyway, Waddle's probably, if he had 2 weeks, maybe. But Bama's definitely missing 2 studs. Their center, Landon Dickerson, and Jalen Waddle out wide. They're missing those 2 guys, but boy, they still have dudes like.
Oh, absolutely. They're better on the O-line too.
Yeah.
Better running back, better at O-line, better at receiver. Mac Jones probably this season almost as good, maybe slightly behind, almost as good a thrower as Trevor Lawrence.
77%.
77%. Not as good a runner though. That dual threat ability is something that hurts Ohio State's defensive scheme. We've seen it so many times. They really contained it with Trevor Lawrence. It's one of the main things they did well, other than 1 touchdown run in that game.
Let me just stop you right there, because on that touchdown run, Trevor Lawrence didn't have a very good game throwing the ball. I don't think it was necessarily him. It was pass rush. And,
oh, yeah.
And his receivers,
guys were in his face all the time.
His receivers are not, it's not T. Higgins and Justin Ross out there.
Amari Rogers still pretty good, though.
But they had him a year ago. But the run for the touchdown from Trevor Lawrence, nobody's talked about this. I just thought to myself, he looks gangly, and he outran Baron Browning to the corner.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Baron Browning had the angle on him. If you're Ohio State, you take that 10 times out of 10. Baron Browning's here, Lawrence is here, and you'd be like, sure, he's going to cut him off. And I was like, wow, that's just one of those plays.
He's always more athletic than you expect.
That's one of those plays where a scout is going to go, holy smokes, I didn't know you could do that.
He did the same thing last year. Everyone, he does not look like, looking at him or when he runs, he does not look like he's as fast as he is.
Oh, man.
At all. So
I was early in the game, I'm like, holy cow. That had to be demoralizing, because Ohio State was thinking, we're going to spy him. We'll spy him with Baron Browning and we'll be fine. That was just an aside. There are just a million things that happen in a football game that sometimes a player just flashes. And that was just one I wanted to mention.
One thing I want to mention too, I think Amari Rogers did Moss, as if you know what Moss is. A receiver gets a receiver Moss as a defensive back. Sevyn Banks got mossed once by Amari Rogers in that game. But after that, Sevyn Banks played a heck of a game if you go back and watch it for Ohio State. And I know how much flack the secondary gets, but honestly, when they're both on their game, Sevyn Banks and Shaun Wade ain't a bad combo at corner. It's mainly the safeties and the slot corner that have hurt Ohio State this year. And Lathan Ransom's actually doing a better job than Marcus Williamson in that slot corner spot, I think. Lathan Ransom's a true freshman. That's your disadvantage playing there. Marcus Williamson's a senior. But Lathan Ransom had a couple good pass breakups in that game. I'll be interested to see. I'm not sure there's a corner in the country that can cover Devontae Smith this year. They're going to have to double and scheme and zone and do things around him and the other Clemson weapons, because there's other weapons. But the secondary has been on the rise. The entire defense has been on the rise lately. The entire team's been on the rise. So that's the thing, too. Ohio State's peaking at the right time. This is the ultimate test. Alabama and Ohio State are the two best offenses in the country this year. That's been proven now. Because Clemson was the third that you said, well, there's three. Ohio State's offense proven better in that last game. So the two best offenses in the country, the two best teams in the country are playing each other in the national championship. You can't ask for more than that as football.
And there will be ample storylines in this one regarding Nick Saban and his Ohio State ties and his Ohio ties. Nick Saban is a West Virginia native. He was born in West Virginia, but he graduated from Kent State University. He was a student at Kent State, a football player at Kent State when the unfortunate shootings happened on the Kent State campus in 1970. He was an Ohio State assistant coach under Earl Bruce in 1980 and 1981. He was a secondary coach, and he and a bunch of coaches on the defensive side were fired after that final bowl game in 1981 when Ohio State beat Napoleon McCallum and Navy in the Liberty Bowl, but gave up a bunch of yards and had given up a ton of yards all season long. So that's the only time Nick Saban's been fired. He was fired by Ohio State.
Yeah.
So that's going to come up before this game. He was also a defensive coordinator with the Cleveland Browns, 1991 to 1994. And he, I believe, cost Ohio State a national championship in 1998 when he brought his Michigan State Spartans into Ohio Stadium. And with the Buckeyes, their 98 team is as good a team as I have ever seen them have. And they were number one in the BCS and rolling. And Nick Saban and the Spartans upset them and kept them out of the national
One of the rare years Cooper beat Michigan. Lost to Michigan State.
Yeah. So Nick Saban has, excuse me again, an ample history crisscrossing with Ohio State and the state of Ohio.
Yes, absolutely. There are tons of storylines in this. One thing I wanted to ask you about, Bruce, though. Do you think... So we all know this was the game, this Clemson game was the game Ohio State looked forward to for a year. They had the score posted in the locker room. The disrespect card got played. You have this peak of emotion that's the most fired up Ohio State's been for a game this year, maybe in a number of other years.
They finally looked interested this year in a game.
Yes.
They really, before you were like, what's up with these guys?
They looked as interested as any team has ever looked at Ohio State that I've seen. Is there any letdown for Alabama? This was the monkey, you know. In 2014, when Urban Meyer beat Alabama, the SEC was the monkey on Ohio State's back. Ohio State can't beat the SEC in these BCS bowl games. And then it was the college football playoff, the first college football playoff. You go in, you slay the giant, and Oregon felt like Oregon wasn't as good as Alabama. Like they were favored by a touchdown somehow. I still don't know how Vegas picked that spread. And
they had Marcus Mariota. They had the Heisman Trophy winner.
Ohio State was so much better than them on both sides of the line, though. People always look past the trench battles. I'm telling you, Bruce.
People laughed at me before that game, and if you guys don't know, I've been known over the years as somebody who's skeptical of Ohio State when they say they're the greatest, they're this, they're that. I looked at that matchup and covered the game in Dallas, and I predicted I predicted a crazy score. I predicted Ohio State would win the game 63-24. And people thought I was nuts. They're like, they're not going to score 63 points.
All those crazy turnovers hadn't happened.
Exactly. If they hadn't turned it over the number of times that they did, Oregon could not stop them. And you said something a minute ago that is so on. There are many parallels. The Clemson and the Alabama semifinals from 2014 season to the 2020 season.
Right.
You're right. The SEC, it was like, okay, here we go. SEC's better than the Big Ten, la, 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 la. But Urban had a history with Saban. They had played three knockdown, drag-out games, Bama and Florida. But this Alabama team is so much better than that Oregon
That's
team.
That's the point I was arriving at, is that in that 2014 year, you slayed the Giant, and then it's Oregon. Like, it's Oregon. Oregon isn't this. They're a brand because of Nike, because of the associations that they have, but really Oregon wasn't looked at as a gold standard of college football at that time. Alabama, it's like you slayed you got the monkey off your back, you slayed the Giant, but now here's an even bigger Giant that you're taking on in the national title game, and all your emotion for the entire year was feeding into that first monkey. So now, Bruce, how does Ohio State recover emotionally and come out with the same level of intensity against Alabama? That's what I am curious about.
I'm very curious about that, and thought of that in the immediate aftermath of the semifinal. My thing was, okay, Herbie was right. It was, this culmination, this emotional crescendo of a year's worth of frustration. And I'm sure some frustration with COVID and all this stuff. And it was just a perfect storm for Ohio State of being able to unleash that energy and that enthusiasm on Clemson. Can they regain that? They've played their Super Bowl. Can they play another Super Bowl? And I don't know. I think that might be another one of those things you see much more clearly in hindsight than you do ahead of time. This Ohio State team, I think, can gain a ton confidence-wise. There's no reason why they would go into this game thinking that they can't beat Bama. I think they are now going to be carried by almost a recognition, a confirmation of what they are. Look what we did to Clemson. Hey, we're good, man. Like, we're really good. And we're good enough to win the title, and that title should be ours. That title's not somebody else's we're trying to steal. That title's ours. We're trying to go claim it. I think that is the point Ryan Day can preach to his team this week, how close they are to history. And I don't expect an emotional letdown. If that's, I know that's not your concern, but I know some fans might be like, well, I don't know. They're not going to be emotionally let down. If they lose the game, and they could lose the game, they'll be losing to a team that's like them. They have a ton of NFL talent. You're going to see a ton of these Alabama guys in the NFL in years to come, just like you're going to see a ton of these guys in the NFL from Ohio State. The Oregon team had, was it DeForest Buckner on the defensive line?
He was out that game, wasn't he?
They had somebody on the defensive line that is now, was a first-round pick in the NFL.
Yeah, Buckner was. They had a few players injured for that game, or was it their cornerback?
Obviously
I think Buckner was in the game. They had a good corner that was in the game.
They had Mariota, but that Oregon team is not awash in NFL players like this particular team. This is a different level of talent, a different level of opponent in Bama.
Absolutely, and
a different level of opposing coach. Mark Helfrich versus Nick Saban.
Absolutely.
I mean, come on. That's not even. I think most people, if I said who was Oregon's coach, most people would have said Chip Kelly. It wasn't Chip Kelly. It was Mark Helfrich.
I think, though, here's the thing: the games that Bama has lost over the years under Saban, most of them have been high scoring. I think. Would you agree?
I would agree.
Ryan Day is uniquely suited for high-scoring games. He is maybe the best offensive mind in college football right now. He's certainly among them. Every game, every big game I've ever seen him coach, he comes out with a new scheme that makes me fire up the Twitter and say something about how much of a genius this is. Mm-hmm. This game, it was the throwback to Jeremy Ruckert when they hadn't used the tight ends all year, and you take Ruckert, you put him on the left side in the slot, he runs a shake route back to the right. All the action, they motioned, they had routes, everything was going left, and the entire Clemson defense went that. And you saw James Skalski point like it was that oh crap moment, barring the other word, the oh crap moment for Clemson. He's like, oh, we did not see that coming, and then right there, wide open, easy touchdown. Ryan called him a play calling wizard on Twitter right after that. That was Ryan Day. Called one hell of a game. That's something we haven't even touched on. He called one hell of a game against Clemson. Play calling was damn near perfect in that game. So I think the offensive schemes, he's going to mix in different looks. The sugar huddles also, the way they mix tempos against Clemson, I'm sure we'll see that again. That is something that I think can uniquely keep Ohio State in this game. and maybe win them this game too. That could be an edge, is the play calling matchup that Ryan Day brings with his background with Chip Kelly, with these great offensive minds he's studied under.
Yeah. I will say Sarkisian's no slouch when it comes to calling plays.
Oh, no,
I mean,
no,
he's
no,
tremendous.
That wasn't a knock on Sarkisian.
And Saban's specialty is defensive backfield and defense. And I look at his record, and this is just utterly amazing to me. He won his national championship at LSU in his 4th year. He won his first national championship at Bama in his 3rd year. They took a year to get going at Bama. They were 2-6 overall his first year. Since then, 12-2, 14-0, 10-3. 10-3 is the downside. 12-1, 13-1, 11-2, 12-2, 14-1, 14-1, 13-1, 14-1, 11-2, 12-0. I mean, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going for his 6th national title in 12 years.
No, unprecedented. One of the greatest college coaches ever to do it.
That's in a playoff.
100%. But you look at the matchups, and you look at where can Ohio State find the exploit that's going to give them the edge in this game. And I just think that's one of them, is that Ryan Day has brought a lot of new, inventive ways to move the football, and he uses an incredibly balanced attack very well. And here's the number one thing actually that impresses me about Ryan Day as a schematic, as a play caller, is that he can build an offense around his talent as well as any coach I've seen. Look at what he did in 2018 when he was the offensive coordinator. Dwayne Haskins. Ohio State hadn't run some of those pro passing concepts they were running before, and they really haven't run them since, because he uniquely designed that offense around the talents of Dwayne Haskins. Since Justin Fields came, they've had good tight ends. He decided to introduce more under center concepts, more power runs, because they had Dobbins in the backfield. And this year, they've leaned back more on the spread because Trey Sermon's a better in-space runner. Justin Fields is more of a threat with his legs this year, or at least they've used him more of that way. So the way he's designed offenses around his players, and then can flip so many different switches. Like they did it with the tight ends, they did it with the receivers, they did it with Trey Sermon, they did it with Fields running, they did it with your freshman 3-star recruit Mayan Williams came in and had 2 great runs. So it's where do you, on both sides of the ball is the thing too. Both teams can hurt you on offense in so many different ways. It's not just one guy. And Alabama's the same way. Mac Jones can beat you throwing the ball. They can give it to Najee Harris. They have a whole stock of receivers. So, again, this could be a track meet.
I agree with you. I definitely agree with you. And we want to thank you guys for watching us on Twitch. Hit that button, the follow button. It's the heart located at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. You'll get an email or a notification every time that we go live. And remember, our friends at American Betting Experts, they're the title sponsor of this podcast. LandryFootball.com is your home for all the podcasts that you will allow you to become the smartest football fan in your circle of friends, whether it's scouting, whether it's recruiting, whether it's NFL, college, you name it. We've got it all covered for you at LandryFootball.com. Okay. Indiana lost their bowl game. Other Big Ten teams won. Iowa didn't get to play. Not too much else there. So let's get to our
I did want to touch on Wisconsin, really.
Yeah. You want? I guess we could wait. Oh, we can wait a week to do a prediction, or do you have an early prediction? You can, if you need to amend it.
For the national title game, I guess if we're doing one next week, I'll wait till next week to make a prediction. For Wisconsin, though, I did want to touch on their win in the Duke's Mayo Bowl.
Duke's Mayo Bowl, baby.
We should have seen.
What, they intercepted that Wake kid like 4 times in the second half.
Oh, absolutely. We should have seen a Gatorade bucket filled with mayo dumped on somebody.
Yes, that was right. Dump that on Paul Christ.
So we saw a bucket full of Cheez-Its in the Cheez-It Bowl.
Yeah, we did.
Why didn't we see a bucket full of mayo?
And we saw Jimbo Fisher pull his hamstring avoiding the Gatorade bath.
I wanted to say this. Graham Mertz, I really only got to sit down and watch the entirety of 3 or 4 Wisconsin games this year. I mean, they only played 6, right? That was the number in the end?
I think they played 6 total, yeah.
6 total. They went 4-2. I don't think Wisconsin fans have anything to worry about with Graham Mertz because the offense struggled, but it was really – he had no one open all game. Every throw, he actually got off clean and to a receiver. It looked good to me. Like, his completion percentage has struggled to rise above 60 since that week 1 performance against Illinois when everyone was like, holy crap, who's this kid?
Yeah.
But really, a lot of the issues have been with a depleted Wisconsin receiving core, hasn't had as much a complement in the running game as Wisconsin's had in the past. I think Graham Mertz is actually a darn good quarterback, and Wisconsin fans have nothing to worry about. I just wanted to make that point really quick.
Why did you think he's was there buzz out there that he's not all that?
Well, I had a lot of maybe this was just my friends talking. You have group texts with
Sure.
other people that watch football. A lot of them were saying, like, remember when people thought Graham Mertz was good? I think he's still pretty good. This team around him is just having some issues right now, this offense around him.
Well, the Big Ten West has issues.
Yes.
And Indiana, I will say this about Indiana, losing to Kentucky in the Outback Bowl. If you're going to talk and act as hurt as Indiana did over not getting into the Big Ten title game, despite a head-to-head loss to Ohio State, and not getting into the New Year's Six over, a team like Iowa State or, some
Florida,
other teams, Oregon, Florida,
Okay.
then you got to win your bowl game. You got to win your bowl game.
You do.
You can't cover up the Big Ten logo, which I'm not a Big Ten loyalist. Like, the one aspect of Ohio State winning the national championship that I absolutely hate is the ego that Kevin Warren in the Big Ten office will put out there, like, you see, we did it right. No, you did it wrong. Two things can be true at once. Ohio State can be the best team in the country, and you screwed up the season. Both are true, okay? If Ohio State wins this game, both will be true. Nothing that Ohio State does in this game validates anything the Big Ten did with its stupid delay of the season. Bama has played, 12 games already? With fans. In the South, they got fans. There'll be fans at this game. But that's just my thing with Kevin Warren. But Indiana, if you're going to cover up the logo of your conference because you're mad they didn't go to bat for you, then you got to beat Kentucky. And they didn't.
No.
So that's where we are. All right, I have a prediction in mind for the national title game, but we'll hold on to it because I do think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be an epic game. Exactly. I think there's going to be a ton of big plays in this game.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a heavyweight battle.
I want it to be. I want this. I almost want this to be. It would be nice to see Ohio State run roughshod again like they did against Clemson, but I kind of want like a classic.
I mean, this one would be, it will surprise me if it's not a heart in your throat, oh my goodness, we just lost it. Oh my goodness, no, we didn't. That kind of a game from both the Alabama and Ohio State perspective. I think the stars in this game are going to be stars and are going to put up big numbers. And at the end of the night, it's going to be like, Marvin Hagler and Tommy Hearns, like Ray Leonard and Tommy Hearns, like Ali and Frazier. It's going to be two heavyweights throwing bombs, absorbing bombs. And at the end of the night, we're going to have a big hug. And finally, like, college football is going to be able to script a fitting end to a season of fits and starts. But you're going to be like, those were the two best teams, and those teams are loaded with talent. And that was a heck of a title game. That's what I expect.
That's what I expect, too.
All right. With that, Andy and I will turn it over to our friends from the Big 12. In Defense of the Big 12 comes your way at the top of the hour. Again, remember, Landry Football is your source for all things football. Go there, and we'll be back most likely again next week with another edition of the A Few Good Men on the Big Ten podcast.